What's up, everyone? This is day two of the Rewatch with Max and George from the Unqualified Filmbros podcast. We are continuing our, like I said, rewatch of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we are diving into movie number two, The Incredible Hulk. And so, without further ado, welcome to the Rewatch. George, you want to kick us off and give us your thoughts on Ed Norton and the Incredible Hulk?
I love Ed Norton. I love the character of the Hulk. I do not love this movie. I think, we talked in the last episode about how great Iron Man was and how great the fact that it succeeded was, because if it doesn't succeed, we don't get the rest of the MCU.
Yep.
And it's a blessing that the MCU continued after this film, The Incredible Hulk, because as a story, it more or less picks up after the events of Ang Lee's 2003 film, with Bruce Banner living in South America in exile from the US Army. It makes no attempt to connect to that film. It makes no attempt to say that that film was the Hulk origin story for the MCU. It's as much a reboot as it is a continuation, and it doesn't really figure out what it wants to be. Tonally, I think it is very consistent throughout. I think that's one of the film's strengths. It does a really good job of knowing what it is in terms of itself as a self-contained unit. But there's just not enough here to say this is a great superhero film, or even this is a good film.
Yeah, as per usual, I'm in the same boat as you, George. It wasn't. It's not that it was an unenjoyable film, right? I mean, it's a Marvel film. It is exciting. There's action sequences, and so it's not like it was boring. But I mean, I think my main problem with the film was not really anything that actually happened in the meat of the film, but it was what felt like 30 minutes at the beginning of the film during the intro, where it goes through that whole like long montage of sort of telling us how he became the Hulk, how he, injected him or got hit with the gamma radiation and everything. And so that was one thing I can't stand is, especially with a more established character of the Hulk. I think that was one part where the film couldn't quite find the right balance between reboot and origin story.
Because it's not an origin story.
Because it's not.
He's already dealing with the fact that he has this other side to him right at the outset of the film.
Yeah.
You're not saying that, oh, he's going to get exposed to the gamma radiation during the first act of the film, and we see him turn into the Hulk for the first time and have that emotional reaction, and then try to deal with it for the second act, and then the third act decide, all right, I'm going to be a hero. That is a great Hulk origin story that I just said right there in the last 10 seconds. This film is a Hulk solo movie, and I think it just it doesn't work as a solo film for this character. It's an enjoyable enough ride. Like it's part of, like, every year I do an MCU rewatch, which is getting a lot harder now that there's so much new content. But I wouldn't say it's the worst part of a rewatch. It's just that it's nowhere close to being my favorite film in the MCU.
Yeah, it's a tough film to watch, and not because I don't think that the effort wasn't there, or that, that it, I don't know, I'm going to stop with that. But, but I don't think it ever really found its groove. I think there were a lot of sort of questionable scenes that just kind of didn't really make sense. And it jumped around a lot. You know, the whole Thunderbolt Ross and his vendetta, like it makes sense, right? But that was shown in the montage scene of why he was angry at him. And I think if they had fleshed that out a little bit more, or if they just honestly they just said, okay, this is a sequel to the Ang Lee version and continued it, then that they could have done away with that whole and then made it a more cohesive story. And I just think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Louis Leterrier is a good director.
Mhm.
I've really enjoyed other films that he's done. I think with this film, you know, Ed Norton did a lot of rewrites on it.
Mhm.
It still doesn't feel like a finished product. And, you know, you get all these different arcs within the film. You've got Bruce trying to get rid of the Hulk. You got him grappling with his feelings for Betty and why he can't be with her. You've got him dealing with the stress of Thunderbolt Ross coming after him. It's a lot to work into a movie just for a guy who's on the run. And then to add in the whole, he turns into a giant green rage monster. It's just, it doesn't, I've said this a lot on this episode, it doesn't work. There are elements of it as a story that work. But when you put them all together, it falls a little flat.
Yeah, it's a good faith effort, but I think a lot of times, I mean, the one thing I was going to say is the beginning sort of exposition felt very early 2000s. Like it felt very much like the Raimi Spider-Man movies with long intros, except
Well,
this
you
instead
can't
of,
do a Hulk movie without showing, you know, cells on, you know, a microscope.
yeah,
Can't do it. It's not possible. Ang Lee did it.
it's not possible.
Louis Leterrier did it. You got to show the biology of it.
Otherwise, the movie makes no sense.
No, we know who the
Um,
Hulk is.
Yeah, and I think that is like the cardinal flaw and the cardinal sin of this movie is that they just explained way too much about who the Hulk is. Could have been very quick. It could have been established throughout the movie for those that didn't actually know through the communication with Mr. Blue. Like I think that would have
Which,
been an
by the
effective
way,
avenue into explaining things.
Tim Blake Nelson is a delight. And he's only in 2 scenes in the movie, which could honestly be called one continuous scene.
Mm-hmm.
And he steals the show, whether he's with Liv Tyler and Ed Norton or whether he's with Tim Roth. He's the best actor on the screen. And to have that be such a small character stealing the show speaks to an overall weakness in the characters that you're presenting. I mean, at this point, does anyone really consider Liv Tyler and Tim Roth? I know he came back in Shang-Chi, sort of as the Abomination, and like Ty Burrell as part of the MCU.
No.
There's a reason why there hasn't been a second Hulk solo film, and it's because of the flaws of this film.
Yeah.
I would love to see
the
Mark
nail on the head.
Ruffalo. I would love to see Mark Ruffalo get his own solo film. I think
it'd be interesting.
his
Yeah.
iteration of the Hulk, whether it's, you know, post Incredible Hulk, pre Avengers, which it's a little late to do that now, but like
Mhm.
the work to become Professor Hulk in Avengers Endgame, between Infinity War and Endgame over those 5 years, that would be at least like a Disney Plus series that I would want to see. And maybe it'll be explained in She-Hulk, maybe not. He was back to being a human again at the end of, like, a normal sized human, not green, at the end of Shang-Chi. So there's a lot of blanks to fill in with this character, and this film is a disservice to his stature in the Marvel universe, not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But as a character, Bruce Banner is fascinating. And we just haven't gotten enough of him because of this film's flaws.
Yeah, and I also think, you know, the Ang Lee film as well, it was also a flawed film. So it's a tough act to follow, and not in a good way. So before we wrap up, I think let's jump into some of our ratings and rankings, and I'm gonna throw this one to you, George, to start us off. You want to go for it?
Yeah. I'm going to do my 0 to 100 rating first, just so you forget about it, like I forgot about yours in the last episode. 37 out of 100.
Okay.
It's not a good film. Ed Norton's great, but every other project in the MCU, I'm not saying is more enjoyable, but every project in the MCU is better. And as for my MCU ranking, you know where I'm going with this after what I've said over the last 12 minutes. 32 out of 32. It is the de facto worst project in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Max, over to you.
I'm not gonna belabor the point. 32 out of 32, for sure. Like you said, it is the worst project in the MCU, and I would be hard pressed. I wouldn't predict that we would get a worse one, especially at the rate that they're going at now. But anyways, to my 0 to 100 ranking, I'm a little bit higher than George, and I said a different number before we started recording, but that's because I was looking at the wrong thing. So it is actually my 0 to 100 is a 45 out of 100. A little bit higher, you know. I think it does have some redeeming moments, but you know, when you're that low, we're just talking semantics at this point.
We
So
are.
45 out of 100, 32nd out of 32. But I think that's going to do it for us tonight. We will see you next time when we'll be talking about Iron Man 2. That's it from us. Have a great night.
Good night.